Hello from Atlanta and welcome to our annual extravaganza of generosity, Be Rich. You're hearing this because your church believes, as I do, that extravagant generosity toward others is the best response to God's extravagant generosity towards all of us. And Be Rich aims to do exactly that. It's an opportunity for all of us to give and to serve and to love in Jesus' name. Now, since the launch of Be Rich back in 2007, you, along with thousands and thousands of people just like you, have served in our local communities, get this, over 560,000 hours. And collectively, we've given over $81 million away. And the beauty is that every single dollar given to Be Rich is given away to our nonprofit partners, both locally and all around the world. Now, if this is your first time joining us, our goal every year at Be Rich is the same. It's 100% participation. That is, we want every adult and every student to participate. And here's why. Most of us want to make a difference, but sometimes we just don't know how. And Be Rich makes it simple. It makes it simple for you to make a difference, and then it makes it possible for us collectively to make a really big difference together. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you in advance for choosing to give and serve and to love in Jesus' name. I look forward, like I hope you do, to seeing the impact that we make together.
So a few weeks ago, my wife and I, we were asleep. It was early in the morning. My daughter, Melody, she comes and she knocks on our bedroom door and she peeks in and she's like, "Hey, Mom, Dad, I don't feel very good. I like something's going on, like my stomach hurts and it's like weird cramping, like it's something that I've never really experienced before. And I think something's wrong." And I'm like, "Okay, what's going on? Like, explain it to me." And she says, "Well, I've got some cramping, some pain in my lower right abdomen. Yeah, I said that right, second time. In my lower right abdomen. And I'm like, I know exactly what this could be because just a few weeks before that, I had experienced lower right abdomen pain, and I knew that that was an indication that she might be going through appendicitis. And so my wife quickly, she gets my daughter, and they go get in the car, they run to the ER, and the ER takes her in, and they start running some tests, they start trying to figure out what's going on with her. And they come back into the room and they tell my wife, "Hey, we think that she has appendicitis and we want to perform an appendectomy." And so my wife calls me and she's like, they think she has appendicitis. You need to get out here right away because she's about to go into surgery. So I'm like, okay. So I hop in the car real quick. I go out to the ER, and as they're like getting her ready for the surgery and all this stuff, they're explaining to us why they believe that she has this appendicitis. And I'm like, okay, hold on. It sounds like there's a little bit of doubt here. There's a little bit of question here. So how do you know for sure? Like, I'm not okay with you performing a surgery on my daughter if you're not absolutely certain that that's what's going on. And they're like, "Well, that's what we think it is." And I said, "Well, we want to know for sure." And they said, "Okay, well, if that's going to happen, if she's going to have more tests done to determine this for sure, she's going to have to be transferred to Children's Mercy in Kansas City." And we're like, okay, well, then that's what we're going to do. Now, just to fast forward real quick in the story so you guys know how it all ends. We get to Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City. They do run those more tests. And guess what? She did not have appendicitis. She had something else entirely. Thank goodness they did not take out her appendix for absolutely no reason that day. And what she has is something that she's working through, and she's in good health. So that's the good end of the story. But just to jump back for just a moment, when they told us that they had to transfer her to Children's Mercy, I am sweaty. Like, this is what I get for playing drums and preaching on the same day. When they come into the hospital room and tell us this, they're like, "In order to get to Children's Mercy, you can't take her there yourself. We have to actually send an ambulance crew from Kansas City down to here, pick her up from Mosaic here in town, and drive her up there." And we're like, okay. So this ambulance crew, they come down from Kansas City, and these 5 or 6 guys come into this hospital room, in the emergency room there, and they begin to immediately start tending to my daughter. They start asking her all kinds of questions. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, this is off to a really fast start here. And some of you may know where I'm going with this, right? I'm like, hold on. Before we go any further here, I got to know real quick, are you guys Republican or Democrat? Because I don't know if I can trust the care of my daughter to you if I don't know how you vote, right? No, not at all. Like, in that moment, I didn't care one bit how they vote or what their politics were, what they believe, if we believe the same things. I didn't care about their politics. In that moment, I cared about one thing. I cared about their competency. Because in this moment, this was an emergency. And when you're in an emergency, you suddenly don't care what other people believe or if you believe the same, or you don't care about other people's politics. And as we launch Be Rich today, I think there's potential that we might be moving into a little bit of a national emergency. Because if it has dawned on you, maybe it hasn't dawned on you yet, it's dawned on me, we are 1 year away from our next presidential election. And we all remember how the last one went and how much fun that was for all of us, right? So we're kind of moving into a season over the next year that's going to feel very divided. And so I thought, maybe today I'll start with a verse that may be familiar to all of us. Maybe you've heard this verse before. I think it's something that we can all agree on. And it comes to us from the prophet Micah, who wrote this hundreds of years before Jesus would actually come onto the scene. And this is what he says. Again, maybe you've heard this before. Maybe you just didn't even know it was in the Bible. This is how he starts. Micah says this: He, meaning God, has shown you, O mortal, meaning man, it's just a fancy way of saying mankind, humankind. He's shown you, humans, what is good, what is right, what is wrong, what is good behavior, what he wants from you. Not good enough to go to heaven, by the way, wink, wink. So if you missed the last few weeks, and I think it was a fantastic series, not good enough for that, because we talked about what good enough for heaven is. But he says this: He's shown you what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what he wants from you as human beings. And this is what he wants. Oh, and what does the Lord require of you? This is it: to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. That's the part that maybe you have heard before. Now, these things, justice, mercy, humility, these are things that we love to see exhibited from and in other people, right? You want justice, you want mercy from other people when you've done something and you deserve a consequence and you don't get what you deserve, or when you do get what you don't deserve. Like, you love to see that from other people, right? You love and you are attracted to humility in others. None of us like to see like prideful, self-centered people, right? So it's hard to argue these things: justice, mercy, humility. It's hard to argue those things. But recently, I've heard, and I haven't been able to verify this yet, but I heard recently that there was a new manuscript of Micah, like an original manuscript of Micah that's been discovered. And in this new manuscript of Micah, it actually adds some text to this verse. It's very interesting. It starts off the same way: to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. But then it goes on, except during political seasons. And then you can act and you can react and you can behave and you can talk and you can post on social media like everybody else. I have to believe, again, I haven't been able to verify this new manuscript that's been found, but I have to believe that it exists, because this is like what we experience, right? As we enter into political seasons. Maybe over the next year, this is going to be what we experience, this right here. Because it seems like as we enter into political seasons that all of us, or at least most of us, give ourselves permission to put things like justice and mercy and kindness and peace and humility. We kind of give ourselves permission to put those things on hold a little bit in our interactions with other people. I mean, yeah, Thanksgiving will come around and we'll be nice then, and Christmas will be nice then, but then January 1st, we're right back at it, right? Like, we're all about like what we believe, and we're all about putting our stuff on hold. We're all about getting back to disliking people, unliking people, mistreating people, maybe even going so far as to hating some people that aren't like us, right? And political seasons, I think, are especially difficult for churches like ours. Because in churches like ours, one of the things that I love about those of you that are sitting in the seats right now and those of you watching online, what I love is that we are politically diverse. We're theologically diverse. We all think differently. And you know why we all think differently? Because we're all raised differently. Every single one of us have different life experiences. And those different life experiences, they impact the way that you see God, and the way that I see God, and the way that you see the world, and the way that you see people, and the way that you see culture, and the way that you see politics. Your own life experiences are going to affect all of those things. You see, disagreement with one another, which is bound to happen in the next 13 months, disagreement politically, disagreement theologically, these disagreements are created by divergent or different life experiences, not low IQ. I mean, isn't it true that oftentimes you tend to think that people who disagree with you, well, they can't possibly be as smart as I am then, right? You know what else it's not? It's also not lack of character. When we assume that people who disagree with us, the reason that we disagree is because they're not as smart as us or because they lack the character that you and I have, when we do this to other people, we are doing to others what we would not want them to do to ourselves. We're sizing people up, writing them off. Sizing people up, writing them off. We're sizing them up. We're going, hey, I recognize that you walked in different shoes throughout your life. I realize that you've had a different life experience than me. I realize that all of your experiences are different than mine, but you know what? I understand you perfectly, and therefore I'm going to write you off because you just can't possibly be as smart as I am, or that you've got a character flaw in there that I don't have. And when we do that, what we're doing is we're exposing our own immaturity. We're exposing our own small worldview. It's like, I can't get beyond my worldview, like my experiences, the shoes I've walked in. I can't get beyond that to understand and experience and see why it is that you might believe what I, like differently than what I believe. And mature people don't go there. And Jesus followers, we definitely don't go there. You know why? Because Jesus didn't go there. I mean, if you're here today and you consider yourself a Jesus follower, aren't you glad that Jesus doesn't size you up and write you off? I mean, for me, I feel like Jesus has every right to size me up and write me off. Maybe even more so. Because for me, like, I grew up a church kid. I've been in church my entire life. In fact, I've told you guys this before. I did a thing when I was in church as a young kid for many years called Bible Quiz. We would study the Bible, and then we would go to competitions, and we'd answer questions about the Bible. And then as you moved up, you got to points where you would actually just memorize like chapter and verse, word for word of the Bible. So when I sin, or when I sinned as a kid, like, I could quote the chapter and verse that indicated why that was a sin. Like, I knew better, and yet I did it anyway. And yet Jesus didn't write me off, and Jesus hasn't written you off, and he's called us to love one another, even if and even when we disagree with one another. You see, these things, justice, mercy, humility, these things right here, this is part of what it means to follow Jesus. And if you want to know what Jesus' version of justice and mercy and humility, if you want to know what his brand of these things look like, if you want to know what Jesus' version of this stuff acts like, if you want to know what it reacts like, if you want to know what it talks like, what it lives like, what it posts on social media like, how it comments on posts on social media like, all you got to do is follow Jesus through the Gospels, through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Because here's the reality when it comes to Jesus. Think about this. Jesus could disagree with every single person he came across on something. In fact, Jesus could disagree with every single person he crossed paths with, probably on most things, because he had an understanding that most people, or all people for that matter, didn't have. So if being in full agreement with another person, if agreeing completely on all the different areas of life and heaven and all that stuff, if being in full agreement was the necessity for relationships, for being in relationships and having friends, then guess what? Jesus would not have had any friends. He wouldn't have had any relationships, because every single conversation Jesus ever had was with some person who didn't fully get it like Jesus fully got it, who didn't see things the exact same way as Jesus, who didn't understand things fully like Jesus understood things. And yet his response in every single interaction, his response was to love them anyway. And his response was to invite them to follow him anyway. And then he told them, and he tells us, I want you to go do for other people exactly what I have done for you. So here's the cool thing. As we enter into this next year, as we enter into Be Rich together, we can disagree culturally. All of us in this room, we can disagree theologically. We can even disagree politically and still love one another unconditionally. Because that's exactly what Jesus did. And he calls us to do the exact same thing. And then his Spirit, if we're a Jesus follower, his Spirit lives inside of us and gives us the power to do that. So the question is, will you? The question is, will I? The question is, will we do that? You see, there's a tension here at Current that we're okay with living with. It's a tension that exists, and it's going to continue to exist, but it's especially present in churches like ours that are just, we want to be a place for all people, regardless of where you're at in your faith, to be able to explore what it means to follow Jesus. So that creates a tension that we're okay with living with here. And that tension is that there are going to be differing views, and there's going to be differing theologies, and there's going to be differing worldviews. And to be honest, if we let it, it can actually be an advantage for us as a church. Because if we will allow it to, our differences could actually highlight our commitment to something that's bigger than politics, bigger than our issues that we disagree on, bigger than our disagreements themselves. They could highlight our commitment to something that's bigger than all those things, and that something is a someone, it's Jesus. You see, the more politically and the more culturally diverse that we are, the harder it will be for us to love one another. And therefore, if we do, the brighter our light will shine for the world. I mean, let me ask you this. Do you think it's really awesome? Like, does it just blow your mind when you, or other people's minds when you get along with people that are just like you? I mean, that's not amazing, right? Oh, he is so cool. Have you ever noticed how cool he is? He gets along with all of his friends. That's just awesome. Oh, you know what's awesome about her? Like, she gets along with everybody and just loves to hang out with people who see things exactly the same way that she does. I mean, isn't that awesome? No, that's normal. That's to be expected. In fact, Jesus actually spoke to this at one point. This is what Jesus said. He said, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? You're not going to get any pats on the back for that. Nobody's going to celebrate you like, oh, that is so impressive. I'm like, that's so cool. He says, no, are not even the tax collectors doing that? Which in his time, what he's saying there to the people that were in his audience at this moment, what he's saying is, think of the people that you least respect, okay? Even those people get along with people that are just like them. Even those people love people that love them back. And then he goes on, and if you greet only your own people, if you only hang out with, if you only spend time with people who act like you, behave like you, talk like you, think like you, if you only hang out with those people, what are you doing that's any more than others? Jesus is saying, listen, I want you to be better at this than other people. I want people to be amazed by how well you treat other people, by how well you love other people, including people that are unlike you, that aren't like you, and maybe even don't particularly like you, or maybe at times you feel like you don't particularly like. So Jesus is saying, listen, when this opportunity comes up, don't mess it up. And then he says something, maybe familiar to many of you again, maybe you've heard this before, but it's interesting if you actually look at this in the context of everything that he's just said. In fact, you can go back a few verses before this, and there are several verses in a row where it's all about love people that aren't like you, greet people that aren't like you. It's several verses in a row. So if we look at this in the context, it makes a lot of sense. But we often, when we're reading through Scripture, you may have read this before and went, I'm not really sure I can do this. Like, this is impossible, because it is impossible in the context that we tend to read it. But this is what he says next. He says, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Again, if we're looking at the context of everything Jesus just said, he's not telling us that we need to be morally perfect. He's not telling us to be theologically perfect. He's not telling us to be ethically perfect. All good things, but impossible. If we look in the context of everything he just said, the definition of your perfect heavenly Father is someone who is willing to get outside of their comfort zone for the benefit of other people. Someone who is willing to set aside their reward, what they had coming for them, in order to give it to you, and in order to give it for the benefit of other people. The context of your perfect heavenly Father is someone who was willing to give and was willing to love sacrificially for the benefit of you and for me. This is why a lot of times we love to say, listen, around here we like to say that that's what your perfect heavenly Father looks like. But that's why we say that following Jesus will make your life better. I'll come back to that in just a second. But God, he loved the world so much, a world that he had nothing in common with, so much that he gave most sacrificially the biggest gift he had to give. And you and I, we get to benefit. Again, we get to benefit from it every day. This is why we say that following Jesus will make your life better. This is why we believe that following Jesus will make you better at life. Because following the way of Jesus is going to make you a better husband. It's going to make you a better wife. It's going to make you a better father, a better mother, a better friend, a better employer, a better employee, a better coach, a better teacher, a better student. If you follow the way of Jesus, it's going to make you better at those things. So again, the concept here is Jesus wants us to be perfect. And the definition of perfect here, as far as the context, is getting outside of our comfort zone because God got outside of his and moved in your direction despite your differences with him. See, this is really cool. When all of us choose to worship with and serve beside people that are not like us, this right here, this is just part of being the church. This is a picture of the church. People that aren't necessarily like us coming together to worship and to serve with one another, who normally may not even like us. There may be people in this room that outside of the context of church, like you may not even have commonality. But when that happens, when we come together, what divides us diminishes and what unites us surfaces. And I know that what I'm saying could be a little bit difficult for some of us to think through, to want to swallow a little bit. I know that this is tough, but I think this is so important for us as we enter into the next couple of weeks of Be Rich. And I think it's especially important for us as we enter into the next 12 to 13 months of our lives as a country. But this is so true. Think about this. No matter how hard you work at it, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much effort you try to put into understanding where somebody is coming from, who doesn't think or act or behave or talk or whatever like you, no matter how hard you try at it, you may never fully understand how it is possible that somebody who considers himself a Christian, a Jesus follower, could be for something that you are against. No matter how hard you try to understand them, no matter how hard you try to walk in somebody else's shoes and get where they're coming from, no matter how much effort you put into it, you may never fully understand how somebody who considers themselves a Jesus follower could be against something that you are for. And this is why the church is messy. This is what makes the church difficult and hard. Because it's so tempting for us when we find disagreement with other people, it's so tempting for us to want to convince one another. Let's get together. Let's hang out. You try and convince me. I'm going to try and convince you. Does that ever work? No. Nobody ever switches sides during a convincing, right? But that's the temptation. We want to convince one another. Or if we feel like, well, I can't convince you that you're wrong, and I don't want to be convinced that I'm wrong, and I don't like the whole thing, it's also tempting for us just to withdraw from relationships, withdraw from our interactions with people. And for Jesus followers, that's not an option either. Because Jesus did not come to this world and say, listen, people will know that you are my followers by how you convince one another. People will know that you are my followers by how well you withdraw from one another. No, he said, people will know that you're my followers by how you love one another. I want you to serve one another. I want you to engage with one another. I want you to be patient with one another. I want you to be kind with one another. I want you to be at peace with one another, even when you don't fully agree completely with one another. You see, that kind of love is the bridge between our differences. That kind of love is the bridge between our disagreements with one another. So often we try to fight for finding agreement, complete agreement with one another on solutions to the world's problems or our community's problems or our own family's problems. We try to find agreement with one another on what the solution is. But just so you know, finding complete agreement with one another over solutions is not what binds the church together. According to Jesus, the thing that will bind the church together is our love for one another. So solutions to our community's problems, world's problems, family's problems, solutions are always going to vary, and guess what? That's okay. Solutions over the next year are going to vary, and that's okay. You know why? Because Jesus didn't command us to agree with one another. The power of the church that has the power to change the entire world is that Jesus called us to love one another. And this is why, as a church, this is why we do Be Rich every single year. This is the second year for us of Be Rich, but this is something that has happened every year for the last 16 years. This is the 17th year of it. And what we do during Be Rich is we come together and we try to combine our resources that we have for the benefit to serve and give to other people who may not have the resources, may not be able to combine resources for themselves. And so what we do during Be Rich is we come together and we give and we serve and we love in Jesus' name towards our community. It's our way of saying to St. Joseph and Northwest Missouri that we believe everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. We believe that everybody is important to God, whether they agree with us or not. We believe that everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. Now, I realize that talking about being rich in church is kind of an odd thing to talk about, maybe even a little offensive for some of you, because I know that some of you are here for the very first time today. And you're like, oh, yeah, there it is. We're talking about being rich in church. I knew it. Like, I knew that was coming. But here's where it comes from. It actually comes from a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to his friend Timothy. Timothy was a young man that was leading his own church, and Paul was kind of his mentor. And he was trying to teach him and raise him to lead the church well. And this is what Paul wrote to Timothy. He said, Timothy, I want you to command, not suggest, I want you to command those who are rich in this present world, and we'll come back to that in just a second, to do good, to be rich. That's where be rich comes from right there. We want you to be rich in good deeds and to be generous and willing to share. Now, I'm going to say this every year. I said this last year. I'm going to say it again this year. Most of us are rich in this present world. Now, you may be here today. You may not feel like you are rich in your current neighborhood. You may not feel like you are rich in your present community or in your present job or in your present friend circles. But the truth is, if we were willing to kind of expand our world a little bit and look around the world, we should, I think every one of us that live in this country should feel blessed compared to the world. And we shouldn't feel guilty about that, but what we should feel is we should feel a bit of a responsibility with that blessing that we have. And Paul's like, listen, Timothy, rich people, they need to be good at being rich. Rich people need to be good at good deeds. Rich people need to be good at generosity. Now, many of you in this room, you are generous all year long to our church. I'll come back to that in just a second because I want to talk about that. But this is just a season, Be Rich is just a season for all of us to collectively come together and be a part of this thing during a couple of weeks with one another. Now, again, this is our second year together doing this, but we are part of a group of churches, a network of churches called the Irresistible Church Network. And for that network, this is the 17th year of Be Rich, and this is just incredible. It's amazing. This is the network that we get to be a part of as a church. In those 17 years, they have served collectively 560,000 plus hours, and this is not because people were working something off. This was voluntary work, and some of those hours were contributed by us last year, which is awesome. And in that time, in those 17 years, we have given away to nonprofits and communities all over our country $81 million. Now, this year, as part of Be Rich Together, there are 56 churches that are participating as part of our network in 15 different states and 5 different countries. And here's how this works and here's why this works for us. So 2 years ago, when my family moved back to St. Joe to start Current Church, one of the very first things that we said, one of the very first decisions that we made is, listen, like we could try and do some of this find a need and serve it type stuff through our church. We could create a food bank. We could create like a clothes closet for people. We could find a big need in the community and we could try and serve that through our church. Or we could find some nonprofits that are in our community that are already killing it at doing that stuff really, really well, and we can partner up with them. And so that's what we decided to do. We're like, we don't want to create energy here. We want to support people that are already doing a fantastic job. So I found some nonprofits. Within 2 weeks of moving back to St. Joe, I found some nonprofits, and I went to them and I said, listen, how can we help you with what it is that you are already good at? I mean, you've got the expertise. You've got the boots on the ground. We are hoping to someday have some resources. How can we come alongside you and partner with you at what you're already doing very well? And so this year we have 2 nonprofits that we're partnering with as part of Be Rich. They're not necessarily faith-based nonprofits. We wouldn't go out and just look for faith-based nonprofits that agreed with us and our theology and everything. They're faith-based, non-faith-based. And these are the 2 nonprofits that we're partnered with this year. We're partnered with the PRC and Second Harvest. Now the PRC, the Pregnancy Resource Clinic, here in town, they provide Christ-like service to pregnant, at-risk, and post women, which I think is just amazing that they care for women throughout the entire process of their choices, their life decisions, care for women throughout the whole process. Second Harvest, they want to provide nourishment and they want to provide hope for hungry people right here in our community, and they're doing a fantastic job of it. Their biggest goal is they want to create a hunger-free Northwest Missouri and Northeast Kansas. Now, you have opportunities throughout the entire year. You can actually go and work alongside these nonprofits. You can give to them throughout the entire year. You can volunteer with them, and I hope that as you do that, and I think you should, as you do that, I hope that you come to love them as much as I do. They've got some incredible people as part of both of these nonprofits, and I hope that you kind of become a regular volunteer for them. But over the last few months, as we've been ramping up to this year's Be Rich that starts today, I went back to them again and I said, listen, I asked them a couple questions. I said, we got Be Rich coming up again. I just want to know what would make a big difference for you. And I said, what would help you in this community make a big difference for the people that are in need around us? And the goal for Be Rich every single year, the goal is very simple. A lot of times when churches try to do something of this nature, they try to raise money for something, even if it's for themselves. A lot of times they set a dollar amount. And they're like, hey, we want to reach this dollar amount and then we'll be good. Our goal is very simple. Our goal as part of Be Rich is 100% participation. So here's the ask. For the next couple of weeks as we come together, from everyone here, we are asking 100% of you to give. And yes, 100% of you are asking 100% of you to give. And I realize again that we got some new people here today and you're like, whoa, they're like, I'm here for the first time and you're asking me to give. Yes. And just so you know, 50 Sundays a year, we don't ask you to give. In fact, 50 Sundays a year, we encourage you not to give if you don't call Current your church home. But if you do call Current your church home, we'd love for you to keep doing that. But here's why, that during this 2 weeks of the year, here's why we ask everybody, 100% of you to give. This is the reason. Because we're giving all of it away. 100% of it is being given away. There aren't any fees. There aren't any, 100% of it's going out the doors. We don't have staff that have to manage any of it and get paid to manage all of it. And here's the reason that we can give 100% of this away during this season that we go through as a church. Because all throughout the year, there are several of you in this room who have said, I believe in the mission and the vision of Current Church. I believe in what Current is doing to teach my kids what it means to follow Jesus. I believe that Current is doing a fantastic job of reaching out to people that are far from in this community, and therefore I want to help support that throughout the year. Several have jumped on board with that, and you've said, listen, I'm going to pick a percentage of my income. I'm going to give it on a consistent basis. I'm going to set up a recurring gift so that I can keep supporting Current and what they do throughout the year so we can on and keep doing fantastic ministry to people in this community. And because several of you do that, it allows us for a short season of the year, every year, to give really big to other people. And so here's the ask. We're asking for everybody here, every person, to give a one-time gift of $39.95. And this right here, this number right here, has been the ask for 17 years. It has never gone up due to inflation. Same number today as it has been for the last 16 years. This is the 17th year of that. Now, I did a little bit of math. Just a little bit of math. I'm like, hey, okay, if everybody that calls Current their home and every individual that shows up for the next couple of weeks, if they were all to give, again, it's not about the dollar amount, but this just kind of gives you an idea of what we could raise for these nonprofits. We could raise about $3,200 for the PRC and Second Harvest. Can you imagine what that would do for those organizations? And maybe you're here today and you're like, Ben, there's just no way I could give $39.95. There's no way. I would just ask you to give something. Now, some of you in this room, I think it might be possible for you to add a zero to that. There might even be, I don't know, maybe there's somebody in this room that could add 2 zeros to that. And we're not setting the dollar amount. Once we hit it, we're there. That's awesome. That's not what it's about. We just want everybody to do something. And let me tell you what our giving would do, what that would fund. Here are some of the projects that would fund for both of these organizations. For the PRC, it would fund things like the crisis pregnancy clinic appointment for people that are experiencing crisis pregnancies. It would allow prenatal parenting classes for people that are expecting. This is one of my favorite things that it's going to fund. It's going to fund things like maternity and baby clothing. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more next week. In fact, I want to encourage you, do not miss next week, part 2 of Be Rich, because my good friend Libby Owens from the PRC, she is going to be joining us in person, and she's going to tell you what a difference that you guys have made over the last couple of years to their organization and how you can make even more of a difference. It's going to be a really good time. They're doing some fantastic things. And we're going to both tell you something specific about this that's very exciting. It also provides things like diapers and wipes. It also provides a refuge, a safe place for pregnant or post-abortive women. And it allows them to help equip women to make healthy, life-affirming decisions. Now, before I tell you what this is going to fund for Second Harvest, I just want to tell you real quick as far as the PRC is concerned. Today, if you have kids in Wambaland or our preschool and elementary environments, they're going to be coming home with you with a little postcard that tells you how your kids can get involved in Be Rich this year. And it's a very exciting thing. I'm telling you, this might be the most exciting part of everything we're doing this year. So I went to the PRC, and I don't want to give you too much of the details because you're going to hear more about this next week. But they have 3 families that they have served, that we have an opportunity to serve directly, that are underprivileged families. They have multiple kids in their home, and they don't even have food to eat a lot of times. And so we as a church are going to provide boxes of food and boxes of wipes for these new mothers and their new babies and for their families. It's a really cool thing. So you're going to get details from that from your kids. Make sure you see that and start coming back next week and the week after with food. It's some direction on there for you. But here's some of the things that it funds for Second Harvest. This is awesome. It funds things like Backpack Buddies and No Hunger Summer. Now, I've explained this to many of you before, but if you're new with us, you may not even be aware of this. I was not aware that this was a reality until 2 years ago when I sat down with them for the first time and I learned about this. But you may not know this. There are kids in our community, kids in our schools, who go home on Friday and they don't eat again until they get back to school on Monday. And the reason that that happens is because they have parents that can't afford to care for them, or they're not thinking about feeding them, or they have parents that are spending money on things that they shouldn't be spending money on. And so these kids don't eat. And so Backpack Buddies, they provide a backpack of food for kids so they can go home on Friday and they can eat over the weekend before they come back on Monday. No Hunger Summer is a very similar program where they're feeding kids over the summer for the same reason, because when they're not in school, they're not eating. Here's a couple more that I learned about this week. I got to sit down in a session with Second Harvest. It was awesome. Campus Cupboard and Kate's Cafe are a couple of things that I learned about this week. Campus Cupboard is a food pantry that's located on some of the school grounds in our area. And it's primarily located in middle schools and high schools and some university campuses. But the idea with Campus Cupboard is they want to not just feed the individual student, but they want to help feed the entire family, which is awesome. And then Kate's Cafe, Kate's Cafe provides a hot meal, or they provide a snack every single weekday after school for kids that are hungry. Now, these projects that we have an opportunity to help fund for these 2 organizations, these organizations, they're game changers. But for the people that these organizations serve, for the students, and for the hungry kids, and for the pregnant moms and their kids, for those people, we're funding life changers. Things that could completely change their life. I mean, Jesus was so clear when he was here on this earth that our devotion to God is best demonstrated, not only demonstrated, but it's best demonstrated and it's best authenticated through our love for other people. It's best demonstrated and best authenticated through our love for other people, even those people that maybe disagree with us, maybe those people that aren't even like us, maybe those people that don't even necessarily like us. That our devotion to God is not best authenticated and demonstrated through our attendance at church, through how well we pray, through how often we pray. It's not even demonstrated best through our beliefs. Though, again, all great things. But extravagant generosity to other people is the most appropriate response for God's extravagant generosity to you and to me. See, gratitude for God is most expressed through our generosity to other people. And that is why we do Be Rich. And here's how it works. I made this very easy for you. Up on the screen above my head, there's going to be a QR code that pops up for you to scan. I want to encourage all of you, just go ahead and pull out your phones right now. Pull out the camera app, and you can scan that code. While those of you in the room scan that code, I want to talk to people online. There's a little lower third there that shows you the address, the URL that you can go to, and you can involved in this as well. In fact, if you are watching online, I'd encourage you, you can just jump off this. You're not going to miss a whole lot. You can go to berich.mycurrent.church right now, and you can just start giving if you're watching online. For those of you in the room, when you scan that QR code, it's going to take you to a page that's on our website, and that page is going to have 2 links. One of them is going to say give, and one of them is going to say serve. Serve is next Sunday, so we're not going to worry about that one for this week. I just want you to click on the link that says give, and it's going to take you to a page where you can give right now. The only thing that I want to point out for you when it takes you to that page is the drop-down menu. That drop-down menu should automatically, for you, when you go to that website, it should automatically say Be Rich 2023. If it does not say Be 2023 and it says our general fund, go ahead and switch over to the Be Rich 2023 fund, because I want to make sure that everything that comes in for Be Rich is going right out the door, right back to these nonprofit partners that we're partnered with. If you would love to give cash today, cash that we have come in today and next week is all going to these nonprofit partners. Give cash, and you can give checks out in the lobby in our giving box. We have a black box with our logo on it. It's a locked box, so you can put your cash and you can put your checks in there. If you are writing a check and it's for Be Rich, make sure that you specify Be Rich 2023, because again, we want to make sure that all of this is going to the right place. And I say that because I know some of you might want to give 2 checks today, and one of those checks might be your regular giving, because we want to continue to be able to do what we're doing as a church. So if you want to give your regular giving today as well, you can do that. But just make sure you specify Be Rich 2023 on any of your Be Rich checks. Now, if you are not tech savvy and you're like, this is super confusing, what is a smart? No, we would love to help you with that too. We have some people, some volunteers in the lobby. They'll have Give, Serve, Love shirts on and an iPad, and they will help walk you through it if you're having trouble figuring that all out. Now today, if you are new with us, if this is your first time with us, or we haven't yet had a chance to meet you or get you a gift in your hands, we have a gift for you on your way out. We have a gift for your family. And the only thing that we ask from you in response is that you the QR code. There's a little QR code in there that says new. We'd love for you to scan that and just share a little bit of information with us. And the reason we want that is because we want to get you connected to people and get you engaged in the best way possible. So that's the only thing we ask in return, but you're going to get a gift on your way out. For everybody else, this is all I got for you. So here's what I want to say. Don't leave today without giving. We want to give big to these organizations. We're excited about it. So if you guys are ready, and I hope you are, on your mark, get set, go Be Rich.